Guys, it's Kelly. I am back with another video for Neat and Tangled as the February guest designer, and today we're going to be using this 3x4 set called Good to See You. And I pre-stamped out what I was doing because the images I was using, I was trying to build like a wreath, and I wanted to be able to know that it was all going to fit in there nice and neatly together. So I'm working on Canson 140-pound watercolor paper, and I'm using antique linen distress ink to stamp my images in. I know it's pretty difficult to see, but the reason I'm using such a light ink is because once I go to watercolor on top of it, that ink will basically disappear, and all that will be left is the colors that I choose to paint with. And then it'll be like I hand painted it, even though I totally didn't, because I can't hand paint anything at all. So I just went ahead and stamped everything out, and I have that pre-stamped portion off to the left-hand side so I can make sure everything matches up. And then I'm going to go ahead and use the distressing colors that I picked to paint with and rub those down. I'm working on a Ranger craft mat, and this is a number 2 round brush. Now before you ask, no, I did not buy it curved. I left it dry in my cup overnight like you're not supposed to do, and it curved the edge. So if you think that would be easier for you to paint with, do that, and then your paintbrush will look like mine. So when I started painting, I realized I didn't realize I was so far away. So we've kind of zoomed in here so you can see what I got going on. And the technique that I'm using, the people who know what the heck they're doing, they call it wet on wet. So I wet the paper with clean clear water first, and then I drop my pigment into it. And here I'm doing the leaves. I'm a huge fan when you're watercoloring of hard and soft edges. So on one side, I'm sticking pretty true to the leaf stamp, the way that it was drawn. And on the other side, I'm letting my clean water kind of pool outside of the lines. So that way when I add the pigment, the water does the work, and it carries the pigment wherever it wants it to go, and it gives it that genuine watercolor feel versus being very rigid, which is a struggle for me when I do watercolor. I like bold black lines, and I like using my Copics, and I like things that are very clean and definitive. But then I look at other people's watercolors and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. It's so loose and painterly, and it looks like a real piece of art. And so when I was doing the watercoloring, it took me a while to kind of like loosen up and be okay with not having control over every single thing the water did, because really that is what makes it, beautiful. It is. So I'm using the Twisted Citron and the Mowed Lawn, and I'm just kind of adding in, little bits here and there. I will tell you, in hindsight, I wish that I had not connected the leaves. I wish that I would have left the stems off, because I just feel like it would have been a better look. But that's not what I did. So I'm so happy with the way that the card turned out. Just, lesson learned for the next time. Don't connect the stems. So I painted all my leaves in, and then I let them dry. And now I'm going back in with a little bit of the Twisted Citron and just drawing in some veins into the leaves, just trying to give them a little bit of definition. Then we're going to move on to the petals of the flowers, and I'm using a couple of different pinks, purples, blues. For some reason, these flowers, when I was looking at them, reminded me like they just made me think of like the same color that like hydrangeas are, like that beautiful blue-violet periwinkle color. And so that's what I wanted to kind of recreate on the card. When you're doing watercolor, you can't work in two areas that are next to each other. You can't make two areas next to each other wet, because they will run together. You will lose any definition that you have. And so yeah, you need the definition so that you can tell what the picture is. So I'm just picking random petals of the flowers to kind of fill in. These ones, it's hard to have, or it's difficult to have hard and soft edges with the ones that are more in the center. It's hard to kind of blow those out. So I kept them fairly rigid as I was moving. Some of them I might have made a little bigger. And then I'm just, picking the colors that I want to add in there. Don't be afraid. Like I started all of them with the Wilted Violet. But then, sometimes I added Salty Ocean, sometimes I added Picked Raspberry or the Bluebird Sketch, or sometimes I added the Salty Ocean and the Picked Raspberry. Like, don't be afraid to kind of like mix your colors and let them do their thing. Tim Holtz designed them to blend well together, and they do that whether they're your ink blending or watercoloring. They all work nice and are friends. So I'm doing the same thing, the wet on wet as far as, putting down the clean clear water, then dropping my pigment in. I will tell you when you're picking up your color, if your brush is drier than the clean clear water you're trying to drop it in, you will not put down pigment, you will suck up water. So make sure that the wetness, the amount of water that your brush has is the equivalent to what you're trying to put it into. So in between each layer, I'm very impatient. I'm very, very impatient. And there was a lot of little petals. So once I was happy with the way that they looked, and a lot of times I go back in and I add darker color. I don't usually blot up a lot, but I do add in more pigment. Then I decided I was going to go ahead and heat set it so I could move on to the next thing. And I wasn't like gray haired by the time that this card was over. And you'll see as, we're going, I'm kind of jumping ahead because I am doing the same thing over and over, but I did want you to get the overall feel of how I laid my color down. I just didn't want you to, also be gray haired by the time that this video was over. I just really, the ones on the outside edges, the way that I prefer to get the soft edges is to put down my clean clear water, drop in my pigment, pick up more clean clear water, obviously cleaning your brush in between, and then putting down the clean clear water and bringing that water to the pigment versus trying to pull the pigment from the petal out. I just feel like I get better results if I bring the clean clear water in. And then when I stamped them down, like I said, I know it was hard to see that antique linen super light, but that's why we love it for this technique. I also added, there's two, like a medium-sized flower and then a super tiny flower that Danielle has included in the set, and I stamped those also on the end of the longer branch, just to kind of fill in that circle. When I was stamping, you probably didn't even notice it when I first showed you the sample that I was kind of working off of. I tried adding in some greenery. I tried adding in another leaf or something in between those petals to kind of break up the green, and it just looked weird, guys. It didn't look right. So I wish that I had found a way to kind of break that up, but I didn't. And again, like I said, still happy with the way that the card turned out. These are just little lessons, I guess, that I'm trying to share with you. So if you're doing something similar or trying to case the card, like, try those things, because those things might have made it better. It's not bad, but those things might have made it better. This is, I'm just putting down the more color as I need it. You never really know how much you're going to use. Like that Salty Ocean, I smushed down the whole thing, and I probably used like one little corner of it, where with the Wilted Violet, I used a ton of it. I'm not naturally inclined towards purple, but it just seemed to work out really well for this card. And then also in the set, Danielle has included these little dots, and those dots are also drawn into the large branch stamp. And I wanted to fill in my wreath. I wanted it to be a little bit fuller, so I stamped the dots, but then what I actually did was kind of turn them into like their own little flowers. So I filled them in with the picked raspberry, and then I also, just added a few more little dots around it. And then I added to get more green. Like I told you, I wasn't happy with the amount of green that I had going on there. Once those were all dotted in, like little pink flowers, I went back in and, of course, after I cleaned up all the distress ink that I have on the right hand side there, I put down more Twisted Citron and Mowed Lawn, and then I just drew in little stems, just using the tip of the brush, and just kind of like drew those in to make them flowers versus just being like decorative dots. You do have to be careful when you're, when you're doing this. You need the separation for them to look like petals. And then also, I was impatient and working when it was wet. So what you've seen me just do there is put green into my petal. Distress inks are super forgiving. Most watercolor is. So I just blotted that up with a clean paper towel, and you would never even know that I got green into my pink. So once this was all done, these stems were all painted in, and I waited for everything to be dry. Now, whether you do that with a heat tool or you just wait it out, don't stamp your sentiment until it's dry. I'm using just some black ink. This is the Pure Color Black from W+9. It's my favorite ink to stamp sentiments in. I'm sure you've heard me say that about 100 times before. And if you're stamping on watercolor paper and you're concerned, I'm working on the smooth side, so I wasn't concerned about it stamping funny. But if you are, you can use something like a MISTI or a stamp positioner so you can stamp it multiple times. I feel like I got good coverage right out the gate. And then I wanted to keep the card pretty simple. So I picked out some like lilac colored paper. This is actually from Simon Says Stamp, and I apologize, I don't know the name offhand. And then I just cut a square out to kind of put in the background. Just for a little teeny tiny pop of color. This card felt very spring to me, probably because I am desperately longing for spring. We haven't even had a bad winter, and I'm desperately longing for spring. It was terrible. And then I cut a piece of purple craft foam, and here I'm like, you can see me looking at my glue like, why isn't this coming? Nothing was blocked. I don't know what its problem was. But I'm going to go ahead and mount the painted panel onto the craft foam. This is another great way if you have any warping to get rid of that. I usually put mine underneath a book after it's all dry and let it sit there, for a couple of hours or overnight. And then I'm going to mount that onto my card base. I wanted to add some shimmer, but you have to be careful with this because it's water-based, and the distress inks are water-based. So you can really move around that pigment. So I was very careful to make sure I just stayed in the petal I was working with to add just that little bit of shimmer. There I'm checking out to see like where I need some more. And then that's basically the whole card. So thank you so much for joining me. I will catch you guys on the next video. Bye.